All right, y'all, we live. We're about to go. He's on mute.
Feeling great.
Let me play some music.
So wait for people jump on Facebook trying to get this thing lit, man. Stop, share it with your friends, man. Jump on. Tell a friend. Good. Register. Got 5 of these, you know. Ready? Right. We're looking for a few more. Facebook, what's up? Where you at? Lock in. We about to jump this thing off, man. As always, y'all that's in the building already, man, how y'all doing, man? We appreciate y'all being here. I got some questions and all that. You know, when my father was locked up, I used to be asking these questions like, Daddy, like when you coming home, or like, Daddy, why you left me alone? These was like real questions. Years later, I found myself getting locked up, following certain paths, and my son was surprised to ask me the same questions. He was young. And when I was inside prison, you know, Obama just won. I just had like a lot of energy in me, a lot of music in me, and I came out with a song called Daddy Question Why and When. I'd like to share that with y'all. These are the questions that's usually asked by a son who fathers up in the pen like, Daddy, when are you coming home? Or Daddy, why did you leave me alone? I said, these are the questions that's usually asked by a daughter who fathers up in the pen like, Daddy, when are you coming home? Or Daddy, why did you leave me alone? This song for you, I guess this part 2. Son, sorry, Daddy left. Why the weeks be so long, months stretched to years for years, the tears held up inside. I tried to let them go, hurt so much, the pain unbearable. Last time I saw you was in 04, up inside Auburn at a festival. We was having fun, son, kicking and kickball. I wish we had a court with a place to be ball. You was only 4, not even 3 feet tall, but you was smart, beat me in, connect ball. And I love your smile, brighten my days up. Doing bad, son, messed my life up. Question was asked, I guess you had plenty. Staring in your eyes, son, I knew you had many. Cause these are the questions that's usually asked by a son who fathers up in the pen like, Daddy, when are you coming home? Or Daddy, why did you leave me alone? I said, these are the questions that's usually asked by a daughter who fathers up in the pen like, Daddy, when are you coming home? Or Daddy, why did you leave me alone? I lost my father to these street life. Guns going off, targets on sight. Gunned down, man, made pops got locked up. 39 years later, said 32 years later, damn, we was locked up. With me in the streets, never taught me how to get the girl between the sheets. Never seen my crossover or miss and jump shot. I wish he was there to get me off the block. I wish some nights I wish very often. Some nights I felt like Annie. I'm an orphan, siblings of 7. I'm the second oldest. My brother used to teach me because my pops wasn't there. We used to go see him when we was much younger. Both me and my sisters eating them cheeseburgers. Question was asked, we had so many. Staring in his eyes, he knew we had plenty. Cause these are the questions that's usually asked by a son who fathers up in the pen like, Daddy, when are you coming home? Or Daddy, why did you leave me alone? I said, these are the questions that's usually asked by a daughter who fathers up in the pen like, Daddy, when are you coming home? Or Daddy, why did you leave me alone? Now we caught up in the catch, 22. I abandoned my son, Dad, just like you. We done took to the street, Dad. Moved how we wanted, Corey. Moved how we wanted, Lab. But what about the children? Knew that our actions came with a price. The warnings was there, but we wouldn't let it suffice. Getting locked up with just a small blessing. We could have been dead. We could have been paralyzed. We could have been... Man, we should have been good fathers, been there for our children like good fathers. Or the question that they ask, man, they getting harder. Or the BS that we tell them, man, they get smarter. So it's time for us to step it up. Leave the street life alone. Give it up. Be smart. Play your role. Play your part. And when they ask you why, speak from your heart. Peace. We're in the building, man.
Yes.
How y'all doing, man? My name is A-Rock. A-Rock stands for Angel Pass the Rockets for basketball. I got that at a young age, 11, 12 years old in Harlem, Sandy Projects. Just, you know what I mean, just want to have a name for myself, something that was cool. And I just named myself that. I use this name inside the work, inside the spaces, because my name is real dear to me. It's real connected to who I am. And once I started to learn and started to educate myself more, I realized that most of our names, definitely in America, just come from a lot of slavery, a lot of white supremacy, a lot of just whiteness, plantations, and on and on. I'm named after my father, and I'm named after my grandfather. So I honor that legacy, but I'm definitely into the fact that the way we create change, the way we honor ourselves, is starting to name our children after things that actually represent them. You know, and A-Rock represents me. That's my little introduction. We'll let Greg come in with her introduction, and then we're going to introduce the whole 5-part webinar. And thank y'all all for being here. Thank y'all for joining, signing up. We got 4 more of these, so definitely keep on getting people to sign up and keep us raising them high. Let's get educated.
Yes. Thank you, A-Rock. I appreciate that. Peace and love, family. Thank y'all so much for coming out. My name is Ellis. First and foremost, I am a child of God. I am the daughter of Eddie and Ife Ellis, the granddaughter of Vera and Evan migrated from the beautiful island of Jamaica, West Indies. And I come today honored to co-moderate this panel with A-Rock, you know, my dad, Eddie Ellis. I stand on. What happened? I don't know what happened. Uh-oh. I don't know what happened. We had a quick glitch, but I apologize for that. My father is Eddie Ellis. I always speak about him in the present tense because his energy and his spirit is always with me, despite him serving 25 years in prison. You know, for so much into the woman that I am today, and I stand on his legacy. And I could never fill his shoes and blazing my own trail, but the legacy that he created is being perpetuated and fulfilled every single day. You know, he used to say, I come as one, but I bring 10,000 with me, because my ancestors are all around me. So I receive them, I welcome them, and that's about me. Currently, I am a social worker, program manager for leadership and training at the Center for Justice, and an adjunct professor at the School of Social Work. So welcome. Like I said, I am honored and privileged to be co-moderating this panel today, talking about the non-traditional approaches with my brother, A-Rock. So I'll turn it back over to you, A-Rock.
Yes. Peace, y'all. Once again, we in the building, man. We just the journey's been real. Thank y'all. First and foremost, I want to just welcome everybody that's in the building. Let y'all know we are thankful for y'all being here. We also want to bring our ancestors inside the building, so I'll be doing that a little bit later. I have my libation cup. We'll be giving us libations. This has just been the journey, man. So what I want to do real quick, I want to just like go over why you here, why we here. You know, today's webinar is about the echo of the legacy. And this is pretty much how our lives link all together, presenting a 5-part webinar series, sharing it Zoom widely to multiple communities across the different geographical spaces. This analysis and roots of the non-traditional approach to criminal social justice and health justice. We bring forth the spirits of our ancestors and ask the elders, the women, the youth, the men, the neighborhood most impacted by the criminal punishment system, grassroots community-based organizations, our funders, and local leaders to come through. These webinars will allow us for the general public to get political development within the local neighborhoods. We hope to generate community-specific approaches to wellness and liberation that the local community can use to fight and heal. We hope to see and feel vibrations from our college students, researchers, our policymakers, our family members, and our African and Indigenous relatives. We would love for our queer, trans, incarcerated, and detained folks to also be present with us. Come join us for this important and engaging webinar series. Please come with positive energy and be prepared to do some healing work. This first part, webinar 5-part series, will focus on the Green Haven Think Tank, the Bedford Hill Sisters, and the Resurrection Study Group. We have an awesome panel of leaders that are in the movement right now. They're not just talking, they're not just living their life. I mean, they're really in the movement. They've really been putting in years of sacrifices and journey for us to be right here. Pretty much, I got a little tongue-tied, sorry. Just giving it up to, these is our black leaders, these is our sisters, these is our brothers. One of our members was definitely one of the elders, definitely one of the founders, Larry White. He cannot be here physically, but Holla went up and pulled up on Larry White. So y'all gonna hear a lot of wisdom from Larry White throughout this webinar. These webinars will take place every Thursday for the next 4 Thursdays. After today, it's gonna be 4 more. Every Thursday from 2 to 4 p.m.
So I just want to jump in right quick, A-Rocks, and just say that the Green Haven Think Tank, right, and the Resurrection Study Group was created to address and combat the disproportional and larger number of Black and Latino that are entering in the New York State prison system, and the constant targeting of local New York City communities by the criminal legal system. The purpose and spirit of the non-traditional approach is to develop hope, political analysis, organizing platforms, and warrior spirit within the youth and people serving time in prison to be ready to return back to their local community as assets rather than liabilities. So this webinar is going to open up a historical conversation of the practices, analysis, and reasons behind the development and sustainability of the non-traditional approach to healing justice. I'm going to turn it back over to A-Rock to share some wisdom from one of the elders who could not be with us today, Mr. Larry White. While he's waiting to get that together, I want to thank our co-sponsors of this event, the Non-Traditional Approach to Social and Criminal Justice, the Center for Justice at Columbia University, and A Little Piece of Life. Time we're doing Zoom webinars.
No apology.
Yes, you always have to participate with the technical challenges. Don't participate with us. We have an awesome panel tonight with Richard Jackson, Blackguard, Catherine Dean, Donna Hilton, and Larry White. And I will be reading their names and bios, coming with an awesome energy, honor and a privilege to know them, to work with them. They are on the ground in this work to end mass incarceration. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for taking time out of your schedule to share your knowledge and experience with us. And we are excited to hear what you have to say. So, A-Rock, let's get it popping off. We are going to get it going.
Greg, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, guys. I can't see you, but I'm back on. So yeah, definitely. I'm not sure what's going on. Like,
Are you having trouble presenting the video?
yeah, it's like I'm lagging again. I'm not ready for that yet, but I'm like kind of lagging again. Shoot. Can you hear me, Greg?
I can.
I'm sorry, we definitely apologize. This is like dragging it. So yeah, let's go with it. First and foremost, I want to just bring our ancestors in the building. So first and foremost, let's bring our ancestors in the building. If we can get a moment of silence, I'll be shouting out some names. By you on Facebook, y'all can shout out some of your names of y'all ancestors as well that y'all want to bring in the building. But these are the legacies we stand on, and it's really many more. But we want to talk about like the Black Seminoles and the Geechee people. We want to talk about Gabriel Prosper. Let's talk about Denmark Vesey, Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, Stokely Carmichael, W.B. Du Bois, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, the Freedom Riders, Fred Hampton, Bunchy Carter, the Black Panthers, the Black Liberation Army, the Zapatistas. Let's talk about Eddie Ellis. And I definitely want to pass it over to his daughter to just bring in his legacy. Because for us, that was definitely in prison, journeying and doing this work and starting to do this work and starting moving this way that we is. For me, personally, Eddie Ellis was like the Michael Jordan of this work, for me. I learned a lot from afar, and it was like beautiful to meet him in person, to take pictures with him, to be up at Vassar College to hear him speak. Every weekend, our elders inside used to be telling us, get on that WBAI and hear the brother speak. Because this brother, along with Larry White, who we have here with us, is definitely the people that help move our movement in a dope way. And then we got another dope sister that's a part of the pyramid, Kathy. When I saw what my words do to you, like her and all of the people that was on there, just was so moving on the woman's side. So y'all talking about a legacy, and there's so many more. So let's just throw those names out there. But I definitely like Ray to take over and talk about our father for a few as we go into this movement, and then we get into that first question.
Thank you, A-Rock. So, as I said earlier, my dad served 25 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit because of his affiliation with the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army. He was boots on the ground in the 60s before some of y'all was born, and even though they tried to shut him down, he went to inside prison and organized the young people and the brothers on the inside to understand the importance of intelligence and education, educating yourself and reading and understanding the power of knowledge. You think that once you acquire knowledge, it's something that no one can take away from you. Despite 25 years of incarceration, of incarceration that separated us, my dad was the most pivotal figure in my life. He poured so much into me. My grandparents, his parents were married for like 60 years before my grandfather passed away, and made sure every single weekend, that I was able to see him, whether it was in Attica, when I was a baby girl, or the many years of serving Green Haven during the whole think tank years, or it was Sing Sing Correctional Facility, where he got his master's degree, or whether it's Woodbourne, which is the medium joint that he went to right before he came home, right? And so once he came home, he started, Center for New Leadership on Urban Solutions, right, which is a think tank. One is the first of its kind to be created with formerly incarcerated individuals doing this work, in different communities throughout New York City. And then we also had On the Count, which is a radio program, criminal justice support, where he was able to just help pass legislation and just stay connected to the men and women on the inside, and then have them come out and be on the show and really make a difference in this world to end mass incarceration. So I could go on and on and on about the legacy of Eddie Evans. This now, what his spirit and his energy lives in us before and moves with us each and every day. All the work that we do is just a continuation of what he did, and so I am honored to be his daughter, and I'm honored to be in this business, in this movement, doing the work, and I'm just thankful to be here today. So thank you, A-Rock, for allowing me to let Eddie's light shine, and the impact of the work that he has done, and we just going to continue until we have abolished prison, not only in New York State, but all over this country and internationally. So, thank you. Long live Eddie Ellis. Dave, are you with us?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So let's get right into it. So I want to present the first panelist. We're gonna read off their bios, and then we're gonna jump right into the first question. So We got Richard R. Blackguard Jackson, co-founder of the Resurrection Study Group. He studied under Eddie Ellis. He studied under Ellis. He studied under Larry White. Richard Jackson is a formerly incarcerated person of 26 years in New York State Department of Corrections. He was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, in the famous Marcy housing projects. He is a core member of the Resurrection Study Group, a non-traditional youth leadership cadre. He is the author of Inside Out. Go get that book. He speaks at local schools and colleges on the impact of crime-generating factors and attitude. He has a passion for youth and curbing the ills to mass incarceration and in communities directly affected by this systemic racism. Also, we have Donna Hilton, the founder and president of Little Piece of Life. Donna Hilton is an activist author who advocates for the rights and well-being of women and girls who have been impacted by intersectional trauma such as violent and sexual abuse and assault, domestic violence, police brutality, and incarceration. She is an outspoken proponent of the need to incorporate harm reduction into our policies for addressing societal and justice issues within a humane framework. Y'all definitely should know Richard R. Jackson, aka Blackguard, and y'all definitely should know who Donna Hilton is, man. If y'all don't get these people contact, they are some of our dope leaders in the community right now in your face.
Right. So our next panelist is Kathy Boudin, PhD, co-director and co-founder of the Center for Justice at Columbia University. I'm honored to work with her and alongside her. She's the director of the Criminal Justice Initiative. She's an adjunct lecturer in the School of Social Work at Columbia University. And the goal of the Center for Justice is to end mass incarceration and mass criminalization and the racialized system and create a system of justice that is not based on the punishment paradigm. She is an adjunct lecturer at Columbia School of Social Work. She has served 22 years in prison beginning in 1981, where she worked with other women in prison, building a community that created model programs in the area of HIV and AIDS, parenting, and higher education in prison, and impacted on policies beyond the prison where she was in. Since returning home in 2003, Kathy helped develop the Coming Home program, providing health care and a hospital clinic for people returning from incarceration and staffed by formerly incarcerated individuals. She is dedicated to issues faced by long-termers, including an effort to change parole policy in New York State, and has helped create a restorative justice program for long-termers inside the New York State prison. She is dedicated to building a movement that challenges the structure of the carceral state and part of a growing community of women focusing on movement building among women to challenge mass incarceration and mass criminalization. Kathy works with people who have been formerly incarcerated or directly impacted and believing that there is a key, that this is a key for change. She is an active member of the National Council of Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. Also part of RAP, Release Aging People in Prison, and on the board of the Alliance of Families for Justice. I'm so honored to have Kathy on this panel. And our video panelist, unfortunately, could not be with us today, but Larry White, who is the co-founder of the Green Haven think tank. He served 32 years in prison, and while he was in prison, he served as the founder and chairman of a number of reform organizations whose mission was to assist individuals within the custody of the New York State Department of Correctional Services in their rehabilitation efforts. As a program developer and facilitator with New York State DOC, Mr. White developed correctional empowerment programs designed to address the problems of prison adjustment from a cultural perspective. He was also a primary advocate for prison college education. He sponsored study groups for both the elderly and the general community and contributed to the creation of programs that included the Quaker-sponsored Alternative to Violence programs. The expanded number of organizations and study groups found in maximum security state prisons are a direct result of Mr. White's dedicated efforts. worked to organize the first LIFA organization, collaborated in the founding of the first chapter of the NAACP in New York State at Auburn Prison in 1970. Mr. White is a co-founder of the non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice analysis, and is also known, that study is also known as the Seven Neighborhood Study, which basically said that 75% of the prison population in New York State came from 7 neighborhoods. So without further ado, thank you all for being with us. Just going to jump right into this first question. I already told you who I am. I don't need to read my bio. But the first question we have presented today is we want to ask each panelist to tell us a little bit about who you are, the work that you're currently doing, and what legacy are you bringing here today. And I believe they may be starting with Mr. White, Larry White's video. Is that correct, A-Rock? Maybe that's not the case, but I'll start with Mr. Jackson. Tell us a little about who you are, the work you're doing today, and what legacy are you bringing here today with us, for us. You're muted. Unmute yourself, sweetie.
First, I would like to thank Paula and panelists just for giving me this opportunity to talk about this historical legacy of the resurrection study. And telling you about myself, I have to first start. My name is Richard Jackson. I'm the full conscious open transformation. My name is Salt. And I'm just blessed to be here. And what I want to say is, more than anything, is that the resurrection study is based on a spiritual truth. It wasn't based on a traditional spiritual principle. It was based on the principle of spiritual liberation theology. And when you look into liberation theology, and we look into James 12, and we look into Psalms, excuse me, I'm pronouncing that. So when we look into Psalms, 139, verse 8 and 2, if I make my bed in hell, the Lord is with me. Then when we pray for me into the prison system, I will still have to have the faith to know that we have the possibility. And also, Sean, this is the one that Eddie loved, and you made us quote it, and I wrote it down so I don't misquote it. It's Psalms 144. It said, Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. And when you understand that, when you understand the struggle and the non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice, and it being rooted in the foundation that you have the power. Remember, privilege is power. So the resurrection study group showed us how to go into the Bible, transform it to reach our people, and understand it from a power perspective. And when we understand liberation theology and James Cone, then we really understand the foundation for this movement. And I'm going to pass.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate you sharing that. Donna, you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, the work you're doing, and the legacy that you're bringing here today?
Thanks, Chris. So thank you all for inviting me into this space with you, and thank you all for just being always present and in the movement. So my name, Donna Hilton, as was said before, I am the founder and president of the Locals of Life. That's not all the stuff that defines me, right? I went into, just for context, I went into prison as an adolescent, and I served 27 years. And it was during that time that I got to understand what was wrong with the system, what was wrong with our society, what was wrong with our government, what was wrong in the world, right? So for me, that started presenting itself throughout my 27 years when I continue to meet women and young women like myself who were harmed, they were brutalized, they were raped, they were just hurting. And instead of getting treated and getting any kind of support and help, especially Black and brown young girls, right, women, like my story, instead of getting the treatment and the support and the services that they should have gotten, they were incarcerated. They were sent right to prison because things probably led up to them being involved in something, whatever it may be. But no one bothered to care that these women, these young women, were harmed, and no one listened to them. No one wanted to give them support or give them the services that they needed. And so that became a resounding theme throughout my incarceration. And it was at some point that I, started finding my voice in there with the help of the women that were inside the prison, to start speaking up and to start learning and understanding that word no, and know that it was one of the strongest tools I had, within my person, the word no. And if that didn't work, there were other ways and things that I could do to change certain situations and circumstances. So that's what drives my work, right? It continues to drive my work because, unfortunately, we're still not hearing enough and we're not seeing enough about the thousands upon thousands of women that have been incarcerated and continue to be incarcerated daily, right? We know, I don't know if everyone knows, so I won't say that, but women have become the fastest growing population in prison. There's a reason for that. There are many reasons for that, right? So that's what drives my work. And so I want to bring into that what you were saying, Rare, about what legacy am I bringing in? I'm bringing in their legacy, right? Because it's not an isolated thing. It's a collective thing. It's a collective trauma and so a collective healing. And that's what we need. And, we need to come together. I'm fighting hard for us all to come together to understand that the healing that's necessary and the healing that we all need is only going to happen when we all come together, right? We have silos, that's great. We do our individual stuff, but our people need us to come together because together we are powerful.
Yes, that is absolutely true. We are stronger in numbers. Thank you for sharing that. Kathy.
Oh, yep, I'm here. I'm very honored to be here with all of you. I mean, I feel like connecting to history, connecting to people that are part of our community that emerged out of the struggle in prison, it's really an honor. And I think that each of us could have done different things with our lives when we came home, but this is what we wanted to do, and that's why we're here today. So thank you so much, Paula, for creating a possibility for people who didn't even work together, and yet we're part of the same movement right now. My background, I became a community organizer in 1964 in Cleveland, Ohio, and it was the summer of the Mississippi summer when people were going down to Mississippi to try to get the vote for Black people. And we can look at where we are today and try to understand, well, what's happened since then. And living in Cleveland as a white woman, having a kind of visual analysis, I guess you'd have to say, about race, it changed my life. I was there when the rebellion happened. I was there when Martin Luther King was murdered. And I learned that the narrative that comes out of the New York Times or any place else that describes like women on welfare is lazy. Women's welfare is trying to get something for them. And it changed my life about the issue of race and racism in the United States. And I remember when Stokely Carmichael came to Cleveland and said, it's great that all you white people are trying to do something in our communities, but we need you to go challenge racism. We need you to go back to your own community and do work. And at that time, the war in Vietnam was happening, and I got involved in building a momentum against the war in Vietnam and draft counseling. And then ultimately, when King was killed and Nixon was elected in 1968, and the war expanded and Mark Clark and Fred Hampton were murdered, I became part of a group of white people who created something called the Weather Underground. We felt that we had to increased the militancy that existed both about the issue of the war and racism in this country. And ultimately, this process, I was underground for 12 years, and this process ultimately led me to get arrested in what's known as the Brinks with the Black Liberation Army, and I ended up in Bedford. And I would say that I brought into Bedford a lot of my lessons from what I learned as a white person. In some sense, how little I knew about race and racism, and at the same time, feeling like what contributions could I make as somebody that came out of a certain background. And the experience in Bedford reinforced what I believed that I had learned when I was in Cleveland, which is the fundamental knowledge that people have who are oppressed and who are living in the conditions of this country for being excluded and downgraded, and that it's in the people's knowledge that we can find the solutions. And that to make that knowledge come out and be powerful, we have to work together. We have to build community. You're in a community in a sense because it's captive when you're inside of a prison, but it's not a community that's necessarily positive. We had to make it a positive process. And so we moved from issue to issue, believing that we as people that were experiencing those issues, whether it was domestic violence, whether it was HIV AIDS, whether it was being mothers, and what it meant to be separated from our kids, and what it meant that we had left our kids, and finally to bring higher education back. We had to build a community of understanding that these personal things that we were suffering with were really community issues. And there were community issues inside the prison, and there were community issues throughout our whole country. And it was only through working together that we built community. And the amazing thing is that community has extended since we've come home. So many of us that were involved in that work inside prison are working together now. And I think that, everybody's learning, everybody's growing. We didn't use the word abolition then. When I was in the 60s, I used the word revolutionary. I was going to be a revolutionary. So what does that word mean now? And what's the perspective on the concepts of abolition now? And I think there's important thinking to be done. I think one other thing I want to add before I stop talking is, those of us who ended up in prison with a violent crime, as did I think having to analyze, what was our choice within that? What was the social system that led to that happening? How do we deal with individual accountability when the only way our system deals with it is by punishment? Punishment with sentences that take away people's life. And what does accountability mean, and how do we deal with it? And I forget who it was that watched the film, What I Want My Words to Do to You. I think in that film, we were struggling with that question. So I think that the exclusion of people in prison with violent crimes from criminal justice reform is a key thing that we have to challenge, because it leaves out more than half the people or more that are in prison. So part of my concern is, how do we change the narrative and discussion about violence, about people in prison who have committed violent crimes? And those of us that were there have a major contribution to make. And some of it is, why did we do what we did? How did we end up doing what we did? What do we think accountability means? And how should it become part of the movement to change this entire system? So that's where I'm at.
Can I piggyback on what Kathy just said? Just one thing.
Sure, Donna.
Okay. So, in piggybacking just what Kathy said about how do we go about tackling that issue, we also, as a movement, as us, also need to look at how we play into that as well. How we continue to categorize and separate the nonviolent and the violent. We kind of sometimes feed that rhetoric, and so I think we have to be a little bit more thoughtful, and a little bit more understanding, and a little bit more present, and just a little bit more, just not sure the word I'm looking for right now, just a little bit more careful that we don't give that ammunition to those who we share as a common enemy. And so sometimes I see that happening, right? It's not a fault or anything like that, but it's just something that we do because it has been the norm. And just be very present, be very mindful that we don't continue that as well. And so we just have to really start. So I agree with Kathy, and I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Donna.
Can I add on top of that?
Absolutely.
Sorry, I've been having a lot of technical difficulties, so once again, I apologize. But yeah, let me add on top of that. I remember being inside prison, and I remember I was a facilitator for the transitional service. So phase 1, 2, and phase 3, for those folks that never been inside prison, these are the different phases of us when we're inside the prison, from the time when we start prison to the time when we end prison. And in every jail, you're probably going to go through these same things and everything, right? So phase 1 is when you get introduced to what's going on inside the prison, what's going on inside that particular jail. So you'll have a person like myself or other staff that'll be telling you like, yo, they got this inside the prison, they got this program you can get into, you got this, the meso is down here, this officer is an asshole, be careful over here, such and such and such. Then you got phase 2, which is actually like a cognitive thinking type of program. And it's all done by the state, which took mad energy and lessons from us inside prison who created our own programs. But these programs is catered to you, especially for like our lifers and like people that have like these split bids where you're gonna go in front of a board and they want to know what programs did you complete, and these programs you need to complete. But phase 2 is pretty much talking about like getting into your cognitive thinking, getting into why you did certain things and getting into all that, right? Then phase 3 is actually a transition of leaving prison, like what you're gonna do after you get out. So you want to get all your paperwork, such and such and such. So I was like this facilitator of this program, and I remember part of the phase 2, just to go and connect what I was talking about, is we came up with our own kind of like lesson where we talked about which crime is worse, you know. Sorry, the bell is ringing. But which crime is worse, right? And then, you know, for a lot of us that come from the hood, we be like, yo, burglary is foul. You know what I'm saying? You going to rob somebody's house, like that's foul. But if somebody did a robbery, then that was like kind of cool. You know what I'm saying? And then so on and so on. So we always was judging like these different crimes. But how we did it was we made you understand like all of these crimes is actually even the same. Because most of us would be like, oh, if you rape a woman, you know, that's the worst you could do. You know what I'm saying? But then if you burglarize somebody, the same emotional trauma that this person is going to live with for the rest of their life, they can't trust their house, they can't trust their neighborhoods, that same type of trauma of, what's your name? And not saying that, forgive me if I'm, you know, if I'm saying anything out of wax, but we were trying to show the concept that all crimes, all things that when we cause harm against each other, or even cause harm against the properties and stuff like that, these all things hit us in an emotional trauma bag that will last with us forever, and it would take time to get out of that. It would take time to overcome that. You know what I'm saying? And it's people that have been through many of these things. The shooter, when you shoot somebody, you're not only affecting that person's family, but you're also affecting your own family. Your own family have to go through the same traumatic energies that's going to stay with them, you know? So that's why I wanted to connect with what y'all was saying as far as the show and correlation.
Thank you, A-Rox, for that. I just want to say a couple of things that touch on what both Kathy and Donna said, and that is, right, that the knowledge is inside the people. We already have the answers that we need in order to move this movement and this revolution, right, and this movement forward. And we are all needed for what we bring. We all have special gifts and talents, and we are all needed for what we bring. So I just wanted to add that to what everybody has said. And I'm going to turn it over to A-Rox to lead us into question number 2.
No, I want to stay on question number 1. I want to bring in Larry White.
Right. Larry's not with us. Yes.
He definitely has something to say. He definitely wanted to be a part of this visit.
Absolutely.
And he's doing it, but he's virtually, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's one of our elders. He's 80s plus, you know what I mean? Doing this for a while. I'm going to share a video with y'all, and I want y'all to meet Larry White. He's going to tell you who he is. He's going to make you laugh. He's going to make you understand. He's going to give you some analysis and all that, you know? Let me share this video. Permission to share.
While he's getting that together, can I give a historical perspective on the Resurrection Study Group? Like, the Resurrection Study Group started in 1989, September 30th. Eddie Ellis, he returned from ministry program in Sing Sing, and at that time you had to go back to the facility you returned from and start a 1-year program. So, and then the Resurrection Study Group, he started, it was called the Faith and Life Study. It wasn't called the Resurrection Study Group until that December during Kwanzaa. The group gave the group identity. He chose the name Resurrection based upon the creed of the Resurrection. Okay, but I would like to continue that after this.
Can't hear it. Can't hear the volume.
Harry in the building.
Yeah. Hold on, y'all. Pause for a second. It's about to go back on live. Hold on. You might really want to start that.
All right. Give us a few seconds, y'all. We're gonna go back onto it. Technical difference.
I just have to say, these
This is good.
Zoom and Facebook webinars, this is our first time all doing this, and so we have to anticipate some of these challenges. I just ask everyone to just be a little patient with us.
Can I give everybody a little historical perspective on the Resurrection Study Group and how it started? While we get back into tune with this video from Mark. The Resurrection Study Group started in September 30th, 1989. It started by Eddie Ellis. We know him as Kibaka, so by interchange, Kibaka is Kiswahili for the teacher, the elder, the one who leads. He came back from his master's program at Sing Sing, and at that time it was a requirement.
Oh, go ahead. Finish. Black on my back. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Black on.
You know, he came back in 1989 and started.
No, go ahead. Keep it. Shit. Go.
In 1989, September 30th, Eddie Ellis came back to Greenhaven Correctional Facility and he started the Faith and Life Study Group, September 30th. By December of 1989, we had established a group identity, Pan-Africanism, Afrocentricity, and we transcended into the Resurrection Study Group. And that's where we developed our creed. We say the creed at the beginning of every meeting and at the end of every meeting. And the creed was to get us into that understanding of the struggle and the war that we're up against as a people. And like Kathy was talking about, the accountability. The accountability was strictly on us. Our communities was in the conditions that they were in because of us. No buffer. And they have to deal with redemption. Like, how do we repay? And that's why we said a non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice, because now we're not just dealing with punishment, we're dealing with the punishment being what Kathy said, accountability of those who were said did whatever. It don't matter what we did. It don't matter what they said we did. We're in the condition that we're in, and as a member of this group, you have to better your condition. Period. And that means within the prison system and without. And it was just an ideology. It's H.O.L.L.A and the Cathys that made it a movie. In 1989, it was just an ideology. It was just like, yo, bro, this is what y'all have to do. And this is what Eddie was about. You know, we see him as this, elaborate person, but you got to remember, he was a young dude coming through Attica and witnessing the uprising. He was in his early 20s, you know what I'm saying? Witnessing mass murder by Rockefeller, coming in there killing 41. He witnessed that. You know what I'm saying? A young dude, 20s. And this picture is 94. I'm 26. When Eddie witnessed this, he was 23, 24. But he kept that tradition of movement. He kept it. And by the time he got into the think tanks, him, Luke Monroe, they realized, yo, we got to get the youth involved. We finished. You know what I'm saying? Like, and they say that to you, like, yo, we've done it. We don't get these young guys involved and show them the oppression, like Kathy said, how they have to be held accountable. That word is so important. Yo, you gotta be held accountable. If you can't pay rent, you gotta be held accountable. You understand what that means? You tore your communities down. I don't care what. Drugs, guns, rape, what you tore that down. And there's no differential part between the communities and the prisons. The prisons are an extension of the community. The communities are an extension of the prison. That's why 75% come from specific neighborhoods. You know, you got to understand the trap that you have been placed in. And I like how Kathy shows us historically. You know what I'm saying? She started in 68. I was born in 68. So she kind of showed you historically the oppression and the duties and accountabilities of whites and blacks to fight mass incarceration. So this has been in our way of development for centuries.
Thank you, Richard. I want to move us along. I want to listen to this. I want us to get back. Wait, Donna. I want us to at least hear Mr. Larry White's video just about who he is. And then, Donna, I'll give you a couple minutes, and then we want to move on because the time is going, and we do want to get through some of the questions that we have. Okay? Thank you. A-Rock, you want to share the video?
Born in Brooklyn, New York. I was raised in Memphis. I went to prison when I was 15, 16 years old. I went to Warren, Warren, and my Warren State Prison. My father never was born as a criminal justice that most of the young people in my community that we followed. When I got to prison, I found out a lot about my own community that I didn't know while I lived there. When I lived in the community of Memphis, we were split. I mean, we were hustlers. We used to run around the street, pick up and all and stuff. And there were good people in our community who tell us we were wrong. When we talk, when we talk about mind your own business and stuff, so we were alienated. When I got busted and went to prison, that alienation was still there. When I got to prison, face the oppression that the guards and all that was coming with, I didn't have nobody to help me. I couldn't call on the community. I didn't even see the community as something that I should be able to call and help me. So when I was in prison, I had to start reading. You know, first thing I know so many people in prison. I know people I haven't seen in years, here they are. You know what I mean? And I started reading this. I got a job in the library. I started reading everything I could about prisons and shit. And then I began to understand. I said, wait a minute, we a minority in the street. They tell us we minorities. But in prison, we a majority. I'm like, oh, yeah. I mean, the laws don't seem to be written that way. Why do we commit so many crimes? We have to get to understand that we commit crimes. Why we put in the position that the only way for us to survive is to commit a crime? You know? So we begin to study, and the more I begin to study, I would go to. I got arrested at a time when our community, the black community, will begin to rise up. Revolution was taking place. We had the Young Lords, Black Panthers, we had all these groups. And all these groups was about informing the guys in the street like us, the hustlers and stuff. They came to prison. They was in prison with me. So when I read all this, I went and I told them, I said, come on, we're going to sit down and form a group among ourselves and have some leadership. So the guys that was in prison when we came in, they ain't nothing like this. It was a kind of opposition. You know, these guys here, they're here every day riding Cadillacs. You understand what I'm saying? Selling short ice and all that. They ain't making it. So hold up. First thing I did, I went to my semester on the week in the yard. And I'm the father. And here's all the groups. There's no group. And the groups are all kids. So I told them, I said, listen. I said, who's the head of the group? Let's name your group. Let's name your group. Let me name your group. I got 25. Next Saturday, bring all your group down here. You the leader of your group, you have to tell them about you. And then look at me proud of me. So I told him. I said, you the leader of your group? Yeah. I said, all y'all in prison. There's one thing all y'all have in common. I don't care how big y'all, small y'all, money, how much money you got. All y'all want to get out of here. Our primary objective is to get the fuck out of here so the white man won't have this. To do that means to say the head of our group, yeah, you have to make sure you make all your members get out of here. The first thing you concerned about is getting them out. That's the first thing you got to do. You know? So, you know, a lot of them didn't like that. And some of them did. The members liked it. You know what I mean?
Tell us a little bit about after those meetings, how did you develop some of those groups into other things?
After the meeting, what was to happen is the laws. And after the laws was over, we used to invite people to come in, call out and stuff. We have them come, they can come in to study Islam, and they can come out all the groups, white groups, Spanish groups, all of them. And then sit down and we had heart to heart talk, and I tell them. And I used to treat them with such respect. Leaders in the group, I say, yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know? And so they dug it. They said, right, talk to us like this, you know? So gradually, what happened is this. We begin to tell them in small, the administration told us this. We'll approve liberation studies, resurrection studies. So each of y'all is supposed to show prisoners how to get along without all the stabbing and fighting and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? That's what you're all about here. You have call-outs. You call out people. You go in the room, you'll be in the room by yourself. The officer will be outside. You take care of your business. The first thing I do, I tell officers, what you mean? I said, man, be in here. We ain't talking about nothing wrong. We ain't talking about doing nothing wrong. I'm talking nobody up and everything. I don't want them in here. So you know what we're about. So I begin to tell them our first job is to find out how the hell did we get here. What was wrong in our community? There's so many from all black. What we need to do? Come to prison. That's what we want to talk about. And I got books and pamphlets and stuff that people from outside have sent us to study. That's what we're going to do. You know? So, went back into the administration. The administration, you got it.
It's our brother right there, man. Organizing while inside. Creating change while inside. Doing them thinkings while inside. Let's get into the second question, Greg. Let's pass it to Donna. And if you want to share more, what about it is.
just wanted to quickly say that, and Larry did it. Larry said it. That, I heard, we have to take accountability. We do, but we have to give the responsibility, the vast majority of the responsibility of the conditions that we've been under. We have to go back to slavery. We have to go back to how we learned how the raping of black women is okay. And we know that the first deadbeat dad was not black people, right? So that was taught, learned behavior, and we've been set up, our communities was flooded with drugs, and then they created the war on drugs. And so again, to Larry's point, that how, we have to, this was conditioned. This was something that was planned. And so as we take accountability, we also have to ease some of that up and stop beating ourselves up, and to understand what we have been conditioned to think, believe, and to do, and also to love ourselves. We have to find love in here, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. Love, and to understand who has the responsibility.
Thank you, Donna. And our second question was really about talking about the social, political, and historical context in our communities before you all went to prison, what was going on in the world. But each of you have already answered that question. And Larry and Donna, you just talked about that, right? And Larry also said, right, the conditions under which we were living were so desperate, it forced us to make these choices in order to survive. And I just have to reiterate that, right? It was no accident that that's how it turned out. It was intentional that our communities were starved, that our communities were underserved, that our communities were marginalized, and that, criminalized, and the police was heavy presence there, right? So that any decisions that we made in order to take care of our families impacted our families and our communities in a negative way. So I just want to go ahead to move us along to question number 3, to move us along, right? And so question number 3 is, right, you are all powerful leaders in this movement. I was just doing the math, and collectively, y'all have over 100 years of incarceration between Mr. Jackson, Kathy Dean, Donna Hilton, and Larry White. Over 100 years of incarceration. That is insane, right? But also, you had 30 plus to 60 plus years of connecting, community organizing, prison organizing, and community building. So what were some of the conditions that led you to organize while in prison, and how did things change as a result of your actions? Kathy, I want to give you that question.
I got a lot of thunder and lightning happening around here.
Me too.
It might. It's crazy. I was thinking about how with the men, it seemed like you began kind of ideologically. And I think with us in prison, we actually began just by responding to the conditions that we had faced kind of personally. And I think it's always interesting to me to learn kind of how, differences between men and women in prison, and I assume men and women in reality outside of prison as well. The HIV Aids epidemic, 20% of the people coming into New York State in 1989, if you think about 89 is the year when you all started resurrection studies, 20% of the women coming into the state prison, 1 out of every 5 was HIV positive. And there was a movement outside, there was a movement outside that was building. But we responded by saying, we got to get educated. We got to learn something, and actually an initial idea. Even doing that came in a letter to me from David Gilbert, kind of my life partner, and also Mujahid Fareed, and that you all had tried to do that. They had tried to do that in 88 and 89 in the men's prison, and they all got transferred. It was threatening, but we were able to move ahead with it inside of Bedford. And I think that the thing about the prisons is it's organized to tell you that you're a failed human being, that you're a bad human being, and that somebody outside of you has to change you. And what we were able to show and feel is that we changed ourselves. We didn't get changed by the prison. The best programs that got developed inside the prison were developed by people that were inside the prison themselves. Whatever word we used, we were partial. And there were certainly civilians that worked with us, and you couldn't do a lot of the stuff that we did without connecting, but the drive and the energy, it came from the people that were inside. And we knew that the ignorance that we had about AIDS, that the fact that people were being isolated in other states, that we wanted to overcome that. And so that's one story that I have to tell, which is we took it upon ourselves to say we need to get educated, we need to care for each other. We're dying. We need to prepare people who are going home. And the fact is that when we came home, Donna and I were both part of a program at St. Luke's Hospital, as were a whole group of people that had been incarcerated at Bedford and had been involved in the AIDS struggle at Bedford. And now we're working in the hospital at St. Luke's Roosevelt to help people coming home from prison make sure they had health care. And so there's a continuity by the organizing that we were able to do inside and the roles and the empowerment that people felt outside that we could do. And the same is true with the college program. College was removed. The Pell Grants were, stripped away from us. And we all knew that college was opening a door for us to really, people to change themselves, change their lives, and take on the social issues that Donna just talked about that led people to prison. And we mobilized among ourselves in the prison to say we can bring college back with a different model, even though the state is not going to pay for it. And, we fortunately had the support of a superintendent that was willing to allow us to take some initiative. It's always complicated. We're never empowered, but you're never empowered out here either. And bad things happen out here as well. So I think we fought against that. But the key thing is when I first came home, I used to talk about all the amazing work that we did in prison and the community that we built and the programs we built. And then I realized that people were like saying, oh, well, maybe prison is good for you. Maybe prison isn't so bad. And I realized I had to change how I talked about it. Prison every day tries to knock you down as a human being.
That's right.
Every day. I don't care whether it's the way they do the cell searches, the way they search you when you come out of a visit, the way they talk to you. The fact that you don't have a name, but you have a number. Prison is designed to destroy you, essentially, and to think that they can rebuild you in their terms. And I think that it was in that cauldron, that struggle, that we rebuilt we built our own analysis, we built ourselves and our confidence, and we made change. So you take the AIDS thing, AIDS thing was, we wrote a book. Got published, it got distributed to every prison library in the country, both the curriculum and the story of how we mobilize. College, we became a model for the fact that in spite of the Pell Grants, you can do it. I think one of the things is that women's voices so frequently get left out of this story. We're a small minority inside a larger system of mainly men, and then you're in a country that's mainly dominated by men. And so we've had to fight for the fact that we too have taken on mass incarceration. We too, as women, have struggled. And, at our Center for Justice, which Cheryl Wilkins and I began, I don't even remember how many years ago it was, but Cheryl and I met in prison, and Weir is part of that. And it's like one of our projects is to tell the oral history of how college came back, what we did to bring it back, as a way of saying that women are also, that's enough. I could go on forever.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Get your book on that, Donna?
Yeah. So obviously, Kathy and I share a huge part of our history, right? So I've been a part of all of that. But something else that was going on simultaneously when we were building out the AIDS program, right? HIV AIDS program, was the domestic violence program, which we called family violence, which was so integral and so important. Before I got to Bedford in 1985, there was a series of hearings that were taking place with 5 women because they started recognizing, wait a minute, how come so many women are in prison for harming their abuser or harming an individual, right? And so they were bringing light. And I have to, in this moment, call Sister Mary Nerney, who's been instrumental in the movement for domestic violence in this country, not just in this state, but in this country, who was part of that, and so many others. And so while AIDS was happening, so was our family violence program, which is also instrumental, because as we were looking for, in the moment, because our women, our sisters were dying or dead and suffering because of something that we didn't understand, it wasn't explained to us, and people didn't know how to react to it because of stigma, shame, all these things. We also had another thing where we had the overwhelming majority of the women in prison who have been traumatized, who've been harmed, right? And some were there based on their responses to that or lack of responses to it, right? And so we all kind of fit that category in some way. And so building out the family violence programs and things that we had to do, create different program dynamics within it to focus on the layers of abuse and trauma that we all had gone through. And what we recognized, it was layered, like they intersected, like, you know, it was one thing led into another, into another. There was no separation of this, right? And that abuse didn't, you know, abuse doesn't discriminate, right? By race, by religion, by sex, by anything. It does not discriminate. And so those were things that we were focusing on as well. And that was also instrumental in my being coming out here and doing the work, continuing the work, because it is just a known, I mean, it's just a known fact. This, we know that the vast majority of women, and we'll say too men, right, are in prison based on trauma and abuse and whatever that looks like. And we have to address those things. And so there's so many layered pieces to this, but, you know, I'm really thankful to have been young and learn from some the folks that I learned from. Kathy is one of them, right? There are others as well. But also creating a sisterhood, like a movement inside, right? And again, to Kathy's point, we were fortunate enough to have a warden, we call the superintendent here in New York, who understood that the only people that can tell you what they need are the women. People can't tell us what we need or what we lack because they don't live our story. They don't live our experience. They don't know it. So people oftentimes tell us, oh, but your choices. You don't know a person's choices because you're not in their position. You don't know the choices that some people have. Some people's choices, a lot of people say, well, none of those choices are good. And that's our point, right? And that, to get back to the other question, where what you were saying about how, you know, our communities and how, you know, this was what happened. It's the same thing. A-Rock, you said it. What's going on in the community is going on inside of prison and vice versa, because it is created to do that. And so at some points we started taking charge of our lives. We started taking charge of, you know, of our immediate circumstances. And what can we do? And there are no pretty prisons. To Kathy's point, there are no pretty prisons. It's not like that, right? But we had to dig deep inside ourselves and recognize what was going on around us and what would continue to be lacking, and to fight for those things. It wasn't pretty. We created some amazing programs, but it wasn't a pretty thing. It wasn't like a kumbaya, and it was all a field of roses. It's absolutely the most abnormal and dark and violent place you could ever imagine. Let's make that very clear. And so to dig deep inside of yourself and under those circumstances to fight for yourself and your people, that says a lot about an individual. It says a lot. And to pull the next person up with you, that says a lot. So I just want to put that out there, that prison is not this field of roses, it's not a camp, it's not what you see on TV. It's a whole different environment. And that in itself is trauma. And so what each of us collectively and those outside of us and listening were able to create and to continue is amazing. And I just want to recognize that in this moment, because it's not easy, especially for those of us that are going around.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, right? Despite, right, the conditions inside of prison to destroy us, to break our spirit, to dehumanize us, we were still able to organize around HIV education and programs, right? Domestic violence, education, right? And understanding, right, self-reflection and how the socialization process that we experience doesn't have to define who we become, right? That we made different decisions while we were in prison, and we made a decision that we were going to come back into the community and pour into our community and build our community up and not continue to tear it down in the way that we had previously done, right? Going back to that word accountability. So thank you all. Richard, do you want to have a few words on this? You're muted. Talk a little louder, Black God.
I say Kathy and Donna demonstrated and showed very eloquently the struggles of, and I'm going to keep it specific, of females struggling in the prison system. And there was a big disconnect between the female system and the male system. Until, I'm going to say, you know, from the resurrection study perspective, until the initiation of different types. And until that time when there was a connect where I began. And then there was a disconnect until Kathy was older kid. And I actually utilized her for the my particular he was the and junior. Because there's a different dynamic how we and we have to work. And they show the more humanistic view in the ability to work. You know, and we show the more academic help in work. However, female shows the more humanistic and the more to aid and contribute things to the work. So it gave us a different view of exactly how we're now living in the picture. And I'm just trying to show the connection of the movement, how we had that synergy back in 1989 with the military built to propel the movement to basically dealing with the non-traditional culture of the neighborhood study, as it's called, and actually having a gender-specific analysis. I think that could have took us to another level. Even today, I think it could take us to another level to have a gender-specific analysis and the specific struggles that we encounter. Even in the struggle, it's our school system, and even though the numbers are going down, the struggles have been great, at least, for women and men. But to cap it off, I'm just going to
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey-Rock. Yes.
We're going to go with, we're going to go question 4. We got this time is like 3:35 right now. We're going to go into question 4. Kathy, the other day we was kicking it, we was on a big Zoom call, and you had brung up, so let me just say it, the other day we was talking about the language changing in our government and the system. And so the question to you is, like, how does the language play a part in the movement, and how has it changed over time? That in the recent New York legislation in the human language, like, let's talk about that more. And anyone else can, like, we'll probably take one more response on that as well. Like, from back then, from a lot of time when y'all was inside the prison in the 70s, 80s, 90s, to like now, like, Kathy, can you expound on it and like give the world some of that energy?
I mean, I think language is how we refer to ourselves, how other people refer to us. It's really critical as a moving force. I mean, how our parents name us, it matters. And if we want to change that, we change it. But I think that we've lived through changes in language in the Black movement over years, tremendously. So I think it's not surprising that rather than be calling, just being referred to as a felon or an ex-convict, we're like, where's the person in that? And I think Eddie Ellis's Language to Friends was a critical opening of asking people to think about what's the impact of referring to us as that. And I think that, but we were doing a Beyond the Bars conference at Bedford, which is an annual conference that we do, and Angela Davis was speaking at it. And in preparation for it, she was referring to people as prisoners. And I said to her, actually, we don't really use the word prisoner now. We use the word, person. And she said, well, I like to use the word prisoner. And I think a lot of people like to use the word prisoner because it describes reality. I'm a prisoner. I'm captive. And I realized at that time, people have different feelings about it. People have different ideas about what people should be called, who they want to be called. And, I guess I feel like being called a person is a way of trying to struggle against the dehumanization that happens to us as people that were in prison. And I think there was a moment when doing something that they thought was good, they were combining parole, and they're combining parole inside the prison and combining parole outside, and they said, oh, well, inside you're an offender, and outside you'll be an ex-offender. And you never left that definition of self as an offender. And so I think that challenging the language that dehumanizes us is a really important thing to do. And I also recognize that people have differences in how they feel that they're going to be empowering themselves as a result of it. And I think that we should, I don't know, the other day I got a collect phone call from David in prison, and it was like, an incarcerated individual is calling you. I mean, that was completely new. An incarcerated individual is calling you, not like you're getting a phone call from a prisoner, blah, blah, blah. An individual. And I was like, well, I was excited. And then I was thinking, but the system is exactly the same. And so how do we measure the struggle to change the language about how we refer to, and where does it stand in the process of trying to change the system? So those are the questions that I think about. I think it's important. But I also think people have different feelings about it. And also, it means nothing if we don't continue the struggle. So.
Yes, thank you. And even though the system is the same, that's a small change, right? From you have a collect call from an inmate at a correctional facility, right? At least they are acknowledging the humanity of the person. One thing that stands out for me in that letter that my dad wrote, the language letter, he said, when you call a person a thing long enough, they begin to believe that what you say about them, right? And if you continue to refer to them as this negative thing, guess what? They internalize that and then begin to act out that which you have called them to be for so long. So we got to just, and I heard what she was saying, right? But at the same time, we have to change how we look at ourselves, right? We are people. Yes, we people committed a crime, people went to prison, but we are still human beings. And that doesn't mean that because we go to prison, we have to be reduced and dehumanized into something other than a human being. So, I don't know what happened, but Donna, did you want to expound on that in any way?
I just thank you for that because it was eating me alive. I give all respect and honor to our people. I get it, but I think one of the examples, and I was sharing it here with my best friend, that, notice how the language and how we shifted this. When we talk about slaves, people were slaves. Now we're saying people were enslaved because it wasn't who they were, it's what happened to them.
That's
right? And it was a forced thing that happened to them. And just that shift right there humanizes our ancestors to say, our ancestors weren't slaves, they were enslaved by colonizers, right? We'll keep that language because we know that's true. So if we can shift and change that and humanize those that we know had no choices, that were forced under threat of death and all rape and pillage and all these things to do something and be something that they were not born to do, then we can change this, we can shift it. So I personally will say I will define myself because I am sick and tired of everybody else trying to define me. I have my own institution. I have my own autonomy. I have my own mind. I have my own restitution. I have my own. I am my own. And so how I define myself is what I want to bring to the world and hopes that that's an example of how you treat me, but how you treat others as well. Because if you continue to define me in a denigrating, dehumanizing way, then you're going to continue to do it to my people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so we are coming near the end of our time. We got 15 more minutes, 17 more minutes. And we do want to have time for some Q&A. I don't know if the audience has any questions or answers, but our final question is, right, the next generation, the young people are listening with hope in the spirit of our ancestors, right? They are ready to receive advice and tools around leading and organizing in a non-traditional way, talking about community wellness and Black liberation. So I want to ask, it looks like we lost Richard Jackson, but I want to ask both Kathy and Donna, what lessons have you learned and what can you offer to the younger generation? And also, that's a two-part question. So what lessons have you learned and can offer, and also what victories can you share that will continue to motivate them along this road? And either one of y'all can answer first.
So the lessons that I've learned, I think one of the greatest lessons that I've learned based on my own journey was that I was not the worst thing I've ever done or the worst thing that I was a part of, right? and I wasn't a monster. I wasn't a bad person. That I had my own individual agency. That I could be beautiful, amazing, as far internally as well as externally. Like we got to give people, those respects and value them. And those are things that I was not learned, and I was not taught. I mean, when I was a little girl, all I was taught was trauma and violence and abuse, and that I didn't mean anything, and all that I was good for was X, Y, or Z, right? And that was what was continued to define me, and I followed that, believed that, not realizing that I did. So I never had a sense of my own agency or my own self. So I'm thankful today that I've learned this. Unfortunately, that I had to go through what I had to go through to learn it, but I learned it. So the work that I do for our young people this is why I share. This is why I do the work that I do. My organization, H.O.L.L.A, does the work that we do because we don't want you to do that. We want you to know that you're beautiful, that you're amazing, that you're brilliant, that you can do and be anything that you want to do and be in this world. That you do not have to allow anything that anybody else says about you to define you because you're not that. You are who you choose to be and who you choose to and what you choose to do. And so that I hope that we give to you as a gift, being an elder in this, that this is our gift to you because it is so heartbreaking to see that we continue to have this trauma. We continue to see all this gun violence is happening and we're only killing ourselves. Our people are killing ourselves. And it hurts me as a Black mother to continue to hear this every single day, all day long throughout this country, how our kids are killing each other, our people are killing each other because we have fed into this BS that's all we're worth. That's all we're worth. We're not worth anything else. So we don't look at anybody else as the problem. We look at ourselves as a problem. We have to reimagine this. We have to rethink this. And we have to re-educate our people, our children, about how we should be and who we truly are. We are a race of kings and queens. We have created the vast majority of stuff. An elevator, the stoplight, a light bulb. I mean, the peanut butter, the cotton sheet, all these things, right? We have done this. Our people have done this. We are amazing and capable of doing brilliant things. And believe it or not, those that are enemies know this and understand this, and that's why they continue to have their knees in our necks, because once we wake up and realize this, they know that we'll be unstoppable. But know that we understand love. Notice that every time something horrible happens, it is our communities, Black people, that rush out in love to embrace, no matter how much they've been harmed. We've been harmed. But we don't see that. We don't see the reciprocation of that. We do not. You just have to be honest about that. But the only way we can recognize all this is to see ourselves in love and with love. And that's the legacy that I want to leave. And this organization wants to leave, along with the rest of my colleagues here.
Thank you, Donna.
Appreciate that.
I want to reiterate the question just for Captain and Black God, right? That to say that the next generation of leaders is listening with hope in the spirit of our ancestors, and they are ready for the advice and the guidance and the leadership that you all as elders have to offer around non-traditional approaches to community wellness and Black liberation. So what lessons have you learned and can you offer, or what victories can you share? So Kathy, I want to turn it over to you for your answer to that.
I don't know. I think that I'm thinking two things. I'm thinking about being a white person inside of a context which has really been weighted around the attempt to destroy essentially Black people in this country, and kind of what's our role as a white person in that. And then I think, I guess for me, it's like the ability to take any situation and try to turn it around to one in which you can.
Come on.
You can redefine it. You can come out of it stronger, and that's real. And that I've seen that all through my life. How you would have the Vietnamese, these people that are tiny compared to the large U.S. that had incredible armaments, and yet the Vietnamese won. How did it happen? How did it happen that we emerged from prison strong, able to change our lives in prison and able to change the lives of people out and came out and continued? How does that happen? So I think part of the lesson for me is, no matter how bad the situation, you can redefine it, you can redefine yourself, you can build collectivity, you can build community, and you can make change happen. Does that change create a revolution? We haven't seen it yet here. But does it allow you to move forward, to survive, and to fight harder? I think that it does. And I think that the world is in a rough state right now. But if we only look at how rough it is and we don't see all the resistance that's happening, then it's hard to get the energy up to keep going. But so much is happening. And I think there's a very particular role that Black people have played in this country, and that certainly influenced me. I don't really understand, and yet maybe the understanding is in the culture of understanding that what's being done is wrong, and a culture of survival and a culture of creativity. And as a white person, it's taught me a lot, and I'm really proud to be part of, from where I come from, being part of trying to strengthen the Black liberation movement as well.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Kathy, if you can add on just a little bit, and I want to add on just a little bit more because I like the way you put that. When you say as a white person, so what is the group of white people in this movement?
I mean, I don't know that there's only one thing. I think that the degree of racism that exists among white people, the fear of Black people having power, is so deep, and white men in particular, you know. And so, how do we work with that as a white person? What communities are we putting our effort into? And you know, I'm doing a lot of work with RAP and trying to change the parole and the life sentence. And you know, I think that it gives the opportunity to deal with the fear and the racism that a lot of people have about letting people out of prison. They don't want to let people out of prison, a lot of whom they see as Black and Latin, because that is a large part of who's in prison in the state. And so I think that being able to be conscious that underlying a lot of the fear are images of Black men, for example. We have to confront that and talk about it. And I think as white people, we have to deal with that. As an example, as one example.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. So,
Black take us away. We got 9 minutes. Don't use all 9 minutes.
be succinct, right? Matter of fact, you got 2 minutes. Make it quick.
I just want to say, I love your perspective. I love the synergy. Just hearing movements connect. And to sum it up, the definition of dialogue. I talk about the word, we study that in the definition. We give our own definition depending on what dialect we find. Like, we really believe that there's a white underground, but we don't understand that that's a scientific mutation. But because of our dialects, we say that there's white underground. No, underground is around the place. You understand? So now when we buy into that dialect of the European male-dominant society, we understand how our mindsets transform into this separate term. Because we pour it into their dialect. So when Eddie talks about, changing the dialect and really understanding the human in that ex-offender and putting a face on them, it hits home. You know what I'm saying? I didn't read that letter till like 20 years later, but I knew the origin. I understood the definition of dialect and how we got the human play. But to end it off, because Greg looking at me like, okay, I told you 2 minutes. I just want to say, the Resurrection Study Group, it always started, like in the beginning I told you, we started as the Faith and Life Study. Resurrection Study Group didn't come about until December during Kwanzaa, when we gained our group identity and embraced our creed that we became a Resurrection Study Group. And at the beginning of each group, and at the end of each group, we say the Resurrection Study Creed to get us into the consciousness and the understanding of the struggle and the war and the engagement that we have to understand in the non-traditional approach to social and criminal justice. So we said that at the beginning to give us the framework, and at the end to put us into the movement. And I always mess up because I don't stand up. So now I got to stand up, and I just want to recite the Resurrection Creed for y'all, okay? Yeah, let's see. We'll start off resurrection. Resurrection. When all the tears have been cried by all the mothers whose babies have died, we will still not have learned what we need to know the most, ourselves. We have not learned what all our martyrs, like Marcus, Martin, Malcolm, Marley, and countless others that seemingly died in vain to teach us that we are a strong race of people who need to get inside ourselves, not outside in the white light of the material world, but inside the black void in which we all came. We are not in television, we are not in the newspapers, we are not in magazines, we are not on Wall Street, nor in the business of ourselves. Our children are dying, and we are still crying. Tears cannot save, tears cannot feed, tears cannot teach, tears cannot shelter us from the most dangerous thing to us, ourselves. We must reach inside our soul and teach our children to respect themselves. Teach our children to respect their past. Teach our children to respect everything they know. But most important of all, we must relearn how to respect ourselves. They cannot fight nor care in that which they cannot see. They cannot see respect as they do not respect the most important of all, life. And so once again, we have to relearn how to respect ourselves. The spirituals of past being enough, laughter and dance are definitely not enough, and the tears have been way too much. Please wake up and realize the time is now. We and only we have to help ourselves. Resurrection.
Yes! Yes! What an awesome way to end our panel this afternoon. Thank you so much, Richard, for sharing that with us. That just gets chills. Man, so I feel like we have time for, can we have time for one question? Behind the scenes, people, do we have time for one question? We got 3 minutes left. Do we have time for one question, or should I just close this out?
I mean, that's a great ending.
That was an awesome ending. We could definitely just pop it off with that. It'd be good, right? But I feel like, we had this audience here with us this afternoon, and I just wonder if anybody has, if we can answer one question to the panelists, that would be a great way to actually end it. So,
and for our audience, you have to go. We appreciate you. Thank you. Next week we'll be much better as we continue to learn this. Plus the weather might not be like it is right now, knocking out our thirst and all that. But definitely, we got one more question.
No, that was the last.
So we want to jump.
No, that was the last question. We good right now. That was the question. That was the last question that we had. And I think that the one thing I just want to say is thank you all for coming. Thank the panelists for their knowledge and their education and their experience and what they share with us as elders, what we can take away. A couple of things that was said, right? We were conditioned to believe a certain thing, and we have to reimagine things in another way, right? What else was said was that we are bigger than the biggest mistake that we ever made or the worst choice we ever made, and that
talk about it.
We have the ability to elevate ourselves. Education allows us to elevate ourselves. So if you all have not registered for the next webinar, please do so. The links, click the links in the comments. You can also go to the H.O.L.L.A website. I'm sure it'll be there. And I want to just thank everybody for coming out. Thank y'all for coming out.
Let's give out some shout out. Let's shout out to our ancestors sisters, our families, and our partners, all the panelists. Thank y'all. Y'all was dope. Once again, Larry had a lot of wisdom. Check out our YouTube channel because we're gonna be posting a lot of these things up. Of course, because of technical difficulties, we're gonna have to do other things. But we want to shout out Dr. Madden. She was definitely a big help with us. Sean Jenwright, Dr. Sean Jenwright, Kyra Page, Baba Seiko Odinga, Isaac, and RJ in the Confirmed Fine Arts. Let's shout out Vivian. Thank you. Oh my God. The tech team, Alex Mash, Isaac, Vivian, Corey, all of the YOC, man. Thank y'all. Thank you, Greer. Thank y'all for watching us. Thank y'all for being here. This was dope, man. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. This is only going to get better. I hope y'all heard a lot. I hope y'all can take home a lot. And this is the echoes of the legacy, man. This is echoes of the legacy. Stay tuned next week for our next panel, where we're going to go into the second period of January 15th, once again, 2 o'clock to 4 p.m., and it will focus on the praxis of healing justice, standing on the culture, the pedagogy, and organizing. We will pull on the wisdom from our leaders, parents, visionaries, and warriors on the wider and